Think of your personality as your psychological operating system. For most people, this system is flexible and adapts to different social situations, allowing you to shift your behavior whether you are at work, with family, or on a date. A personality disorder occurs when that operating system is rigid. It loses the ability to adapt. The code locks up, and a person's fixed way of interacting with the world generates severe friction, fracturing their relationships and professional life. These patterns do not appear overnight. They are stable, deeply ingrained defense mechanisms that usually form early in childhood or adolescence to help the individual cope with their environment. These patterns function as a fixed default setting. Because they remain active even when they are no longer helpful, they cause chronic, long-term damage to the individual's ability to function. The internet has casually weaponized clinical terminology. We often label an arrogant ex as a narcissist, or an emotional friend as borderline. But in clinical psychology, these are highly specific, rigorous diagnoses. The cost of misdiagnosis is high. If you mislabel a behavior in yourself or your partner, you risk wasting years of emotional energy applying the wrong coping strategies and paying for the wrong therapies. To accurately categorize these behaviors, the DSM-5 organizes them into 3 distinct clusters based on their core drivers. Cluster A for odd and eccentric, Cluster B for dramatic and emotional, and Cluster C for anxious traits. This quadrant chart shows where a difficult personality crosses the line into a clinical disorder. The horizontal axis measures behavioral flexibility, from a mild quirk to total rigidity. The vertical axis measures relational distress, from low to high. Standard bad habits, like being occasionally selfish or moody, live in the bottom left. Personality disorders populate the top right quadrant, highly rigid behavior creating severe distress. The defining marker of that top right quadrant is consistency. The distress cannot be limited to a single relationship. It must disrupt multiple areas of the person's life, from career to family to romance. Navigating these high distress behaviors requires a shift from guessing to categorizing. We need to closely look at the specific look-alike disorders that are most commonly confused for one another. We start in Cluster B. This group is characterized by volatile emotional shifts, poor impulse control, and a need for external validation. This comparison matrix outlines our first showdown, contrasting the engines behind borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. We begin with the core fear. The actions of someone with borderline are driven by a frantic fear of abandonment. The actions of a narcissist are driven by a fragile fear of inadequacy. Next is the core drive. Because of their fear, the borderline personality wants to be loved. The narcissistic personality wants to be admired. This creates different behavioral results. Borderline triggers sudden, hostile emotional whiplash at the slightest perceived rejection. The narcissist employs dismissive mirroring to maintain their status. Managing a borderline relationship involves a specific trade-off. You receive intense affection, but you pay for it with volatile rage the moment they sense you pulling away. Managing a narcissist carries a different cost. You gain association with a confident individual, but you pay for it by having your own needs, perspectives, and feelings ignored. From the outside, the shouting matches look identical, but the internal engines are different. One is desperate for a secure connection, and the other demands an audience. Next, we move to Cluster C, where behavior is shaped by pervasive fear and a rigid obsession with control to avoid making mistakes. Here is our second matrix, mapping out the distinction between a Cluster C personality style, obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, and clinical OCD. Look at the engine. OCPD is a structural personality style driven by rigid perfectionism and an adherence to rules. Clinical OCD is an anxiety disorder driven by intrusive, repetitive thoughts. The defining difference is the individual's perception. A person suffering from OCD knows their rituals are irrational, and they find the compulsions distressing. Contrast this with OCPD. The individual perceives their obsessive behavior as correct, logical, and helpful. They believe their way is the only right way to do things. The relational trade-off with OCPD is absolute. You get machine-like attention to detail, but it destroys overall project efficiency and makes collaboration or delegation difficult. OCPD is not a private battle against unwanted anxiety. It is a projected worldview where the individual operates under the assumption that everyone else's standards are unacceptably low. Our final comparison looks at an outward behavior that spans multiple conditions: social isolation. This three-column table compares the same surface-level symptom, social withdrawal, across three different psychological drivers. First, social anxiety. This is highly situational, like a fear of public speaking, but the person remains capable of maintaining deep relationships in private. Second is avoidant personality disorder. This is a lifelong identity. The individual wants connection, but hides in a protective bubble because they feel unappealing or inferior to everyone else. Third is schizoid personality disorder from Cluster A. Here, the isolation is driven by a flat indifference to human connection, praise, or criticism. They simply prefer to be alone. From the outside, the isolation looks identical, but inside, the avoidant person is afraid to open the door, while the schizoid person doesn't even care that there is a door. Understanding these definitions leads to the highest hurdle in managing any of these conditions: the problem of insight. A personality disorder acts like a funhouse mirror. It warps a person's view of a conflict, blinding them to their own role in the damage. Because these rigid behaviors are survival defaults, the individual rarely realizes they are the source of the friction. When things go wrong, their operating system tells them that the world is broken, not them. This lack of insight is why standard relationship advice fails. Telling someone with a Cluster B disorder to just stop being dramatic is as useless as telling them to change their dominant hand. You cannot argue a person out of a survival mechanism. Trying to force insight through debate yields a poor return on your emotional energy. This flowchart offers a pragmatic framework. If the individual acknowledges the problem, the action is specialized therapy, like DBT or CBT, to rebuild flexible neural pathways. If they blame the world, the action is establishing unyielding boundaries or reevaluating the relationship. When you are in a relationship with someone showing these traits, you must base your boundaries on their actual fixed behavior today, not on the potential you wish they had tomorrow. Accurately identifying a personality disorder removes the noise of pop psychology. It provides the clarity you need to stop guessing, seek the right treatment, or protect your own well-being.